Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the Future of Work. Today, we're going to kind of bounce around the topic and kind of just unpack it, right? What is the future of work? Is it really anything new, or is it always been here and we're just repackaging it based on the times that we're presently in today? So with that, we're going to let Blake moderate today. So Blake, I'll pass the baton to you, sir.
Thanks. Yeah, so a lot of interesting subtopics on this. People are talking about coming into a lot of focus currently with a lot of people moving to remote work. And one thing that has been coming up and I've been hearing discussion about is now with people who are working from home, employers who maybe weren't accustomed to having remote workforces are really starting to become quite interested in surveillance software. So installing software, sometimes unbeknownst to employees, sometimes through their consent, to be able to monitor sort of their productivity. When are they checking in, taking screenshots, then being able to use that ideally, or like for the stated purposes, to make sure people are productive. And as you can imagine, this has been quite controversial. And so I think one thing that I want to start off with, not just to address a controversial topic, but given that this is highly relevant for a lot of people who could be watching this live stream, just to see how people think about that topic. Mike, maybe you're a great person to start with, given that you're a founder, you are a chairman, you are somebody who is a leader of your firm, and maybe see how you see this.
You haven't found my camera yet, Blake?
No.
Whoa, there goes my headset. Hang on a second. I will share with you that, this topic isn't really new, right? I mean, before we were remote, there was key logging software, and, there were all kinds of things going on that would allow an employer to kind of beam into an employee's work life. I think, it's a bit overreaching, right? I mean, I think if you have to monitor your people that closely, there's something wrong to begin with. And I know a lot of people, their world is built around managing people, and good people don't need to be managed, right? I mean, you can manage process, you can manage things, you can manage tools, platforms, technologies, but good people don't need that level of oversight. And I think to the extent that employers try and force that on their team, they're going to see a big rush to the exit. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I don't think it's needed and necessary. I think it's overreaching, and I think it's going to create a lot of backlash. Thoughts?
Yeah, Dan, what do you think? I'd like to know your perspective.
Yeah, I think trust is a very fragile thing, and this kind of goes really against that. And as the old saying goes, if you don't trust them, why'd you hire them? I think that that sends a broad message when employers are trying to include, basically spyware on employee computers to try and monitor their activities throughout the day. I think, as we approach whatever this new normal looks like, there's the REM song. I'm not like a huge fan of REM, but it's the end of the world as we know it. Certainly on the other end.
You feel fine?
Yeah, I feel fine. We all feel fine here, but it's the end of the world as we know it. It's going to be a lot different, I think, post COVID, and the companies that really embrace doing things the right way, trusting their people to do the right thing. And notice I didn't say employees there. I said trusting their people as individuals to do the right thing. I think is going to be a competitive advantage for those companies that are willing to put in that to basically to bet against their natural intuitions to control. So
yeah.
So let me play devil's advocate here and see if this changes the dynamic a little bit. So when you're in a smaller sort of company, tighter knit team, maybe that trust goes a lot further, and you could see this as being Orwellian in scope, but perhaps, you might be able to think of this from a much larger organization, something that spans a lot more geographies, has tens of thousands of employees. How do you think about that dynamic when you have these massive, what they see as massive shifts in their companies to remote workforces, and you have this desire by people that are much higher up or might be multiple stages removed from those individuals to want to have that level of oversight. Does that change your opinion? And if so, how?
Doesn't change my opinion. I think, it's a leader's job to be engaged, right? Yeah, I don't know. I think it's Ronald Reagan who said that status quo is Latin for the mess we find ourselves in now. And I think, a lot of leaders out there haven't led well pre-COVID. And so they're going to be penalized for that now. And it's just revealing kind of the cracks in the organization, right? And so I think more engagement, trusting in your team, as Dan was talking about, but we've got people scattered all over the planet, and I trust my people to do what they need to do, and I trust their team leaders to be engaged enough to make sure that they're properly resourced. And I think at the end of the day, if you want to know if people are doing what they need to be doing, you can look at outcomes, right? You don't have to beam in and spy on them. You can just see where the outputs are. And it's not real hard to figure this thing out, but the big brother thing, not going to fly. That dog's never going to hunt. Nick, what do you think?
Nick.
Hey,
I think.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry, I lost the tail end of that. Do you mind rephrasing if you directed a question to me? I just cut out for a sec.
Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, so we were talking about how this idea of like surveillance or spyware, some people call it, right? And I was wondering if this idea of trust, if you could think of this differently if you're coming from a large organization. And the idea here that Mike was sort of expounding upon was, you trust your people, you have leaders in place who are close enough, you give them the resources that they need, and you'll get what you need and probably get outcomes that would exceed what you could get by monitoring people versus on this software. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think especially for larger organizations, there's going to be an increased need for transparency. I think I agree with what you guys were saying earlier, in that the right approach for leaders is to trust their people and to trust that they're doing the right thing, and that they're focusing on what they should be focusing on. But in environments where companies maybe haven't created a level of transparency into their operations, and they don't have measures to really look at productivity in a sophisticated way, I think the companies that haven't instituted some of those things pre-COVID are now, the black box is now bigger for them in terms of like measuring their overall performance. And I think maybe that's where the uncertainty is. And if they can come up with tools to effectively track on how they're doing as a business, then there won't be a need for some of those more invasive privacy measures that ultimately are going to not really provide benefit and are going to probably scare employees. I think it comes down to a need to really measure productivity, and companies that are good at instituting policies of transparency are going to fare better than others.
I think a lot of it is fear of the unknown. You have these people that are used to walking down the hall and swinging by a cubicle, or just, like being able to see things, and all of a sudden that's completely removed. And you better believe if there was a lack of trust in that sort of an environment, it's only going to be amplified in a remote working environment. It really requires leaders to trust their people, right? And so I think one thing that we're learning too, as we're looking at this, people I think need to understand as part of this too, is that just the amount of touch, the touch points that you have, like over communication is really important, but not every physical meeting has to have a corresponding virtual meeting. There are things like even something as simple as that, right? There are these habits that are much more than just surveillance and oversight. It's just a manner of working that you need to be able to take on, and leading in a virtual environment. I've said it before, when I first graduated from college, I spent, roughly 5 years as an officer in the Air Force. And I remember like starting off my career, that's like one of the most visceral leadership environments you could ever be placed in. And then, I talk now, and I have a team that I get to work with in a virtual environment. And I often remark, like, for as difficult as that experience was, in the military, leading in a virtual environment is in many ways much more difficult. And so I think that a huge part of this is trust. You have to trust the people that you work with, and be able to equip yourself and your team with the resources they need, because I think empowerment can go a lot further than surveillance. But I don't know, Nick, I know you just gave a response, but you're somebody that works with me and you have a view on this. Like, how do you respond to that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that trust goes a long way in ensuring that this is an environment where you have agency and you have, it goes back to sort of being able to control your day, I guess, in an environment where you're not commuting, you're not 9 to 5, that agency that people feel, leaders, the right leaders give that agency to their teams in order to, get the job done, but in a way that, that person wants to get it done or is comfortable getting it done. So whether it's, focusing on, certain work in the mornings versus the evenings or approach, I think that agency and that trust is really important in a remote environment. And I would say it's probably easier to have in a smaller team than not. So maybe we're going to see spans of control contract a little bit, just because, if you have 15 people underneath you, it's really hard to, create that agency and create that trust, and also sort of have that level of rapport when those spans of control are so big. I know some leaders are that I'm speaking to are specifically talking about their spans of control and how they want to tighten that up a little bit. So maybe we'll see that as a result of this environment that we're in. Mike, any thoughts there on spans of control? I know there's a lot of research out there about like what the ideal team size is and things like that.
Yeah, I have never been a fan of that term, span of control. I think that is, I think that's everything an organization should not be, right? I've always used the term span of influence, and I think it doesn't matter how many people on the org chart report up through you or to you or around you. It's how you deal with them. And I think we talked about it earlier on. It really gets down to trust. So if we hit the rewind button and go back to Blake's comment about how it was a lot easier to manage when you could kind of walk down the hallways and check in with people, I don't know that was easier. I think it may have been lazier, because a lot of those drive-bys were just exactly that, right? They weren't purposed. They weren't intentional. They were kind of meddling and wasting time in a lot of instances. And so I think what this environment focuses us on is really being intentional, thoughtful, proactive. And I find it's a lot easier to engage with people in this environment than it is kind of navigating the logistics of the physical office. And so we've got a lot more flexibility. We've got more time in our day. And I think this is a chance where we really have the opportunity to reflect on how things used to be, right? It's the old, hindsight should lead to insights, which should lead to foresights, right? It's kind of that progression. And I think a lot of times we don't use hindsight well. We fail to get the insights. And then even if we get the insights, we don't carry them forward, or we carry them forward in a linear fashion, as opposed to kind of envisioning the future and kind of working back, right? I mean, it's all of this is kind of mindset, and it's awareness, and it's kind of empathy at the root level, I think.
That's interesting that you say empathy. It's funny. This reminds me of a discussion I had a few days ago with a multi-time CEO. He's currently sitting as a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar SaaS-based software organization. And, unsurprisingly, like many organizations prior to the current situation we're in, he basically had an on-premise workforce. The company has hundreds of employees. They're all in a couple of central locations. And now they've had to go through this process, like many organizations, of having a remote distributed workforce. And he was telling me that, one thing he's really done during this time is take this exact approach. Rather than taking the more draconian, if you will, sort of surveillance-based approach, he's actually leading with trust. And some of the things he was telling me, he's going through and he's making a point to check in much more often. He's checking in now, not only with people that would be considered his direct reports, but also a level down below that to see how things are really doing, to get a better perspective. And he's telling all of these individuals, I recognize that this is a very difficult time. It's a difficult time professionally. It's a difficult time personally. And so what I need you to do is take that time that you need. If you need that hour-long nap in the middle of the day because it's just what you need to relieve stress, take the nap in the middle of the day. If you need to go out and get that walk because you do what you need to do within reason, of course, to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, because I trust you and we're going to get through this. And I just keep thinking through this comment that he's making and how it applies to the trust that we're speaking about. And he's having great results, given the first couple of months in this. He's located in the greater New York City area, so it's been particularly acute for his workforce. And, by all accounts, it's difficult. Nothing's easy in this sort of environment, but he's saying, this is the best thing I can do and the best sort of response I could have hoped for in a time such as this. So if that's one data point, hopefully that's helpful. Dan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, it's just kind of, I think the situation that we're in is going to be here for a while. I saw yesterday the WHO made an announcement that, or a statement rather, that we may not find a vaccine, for COVID-19. And that's a very real reality in this particular moment in time that we're sitting in. So what does that mean for the future of work? That means remote hiring. That means the elimination of physical workspaces or allowing your employees to work from home. Jack Dorsey made a statement yesterday or the day before, enabling, their Twitter employees to work from home from here forward. And I think, what we're witnessing here is a unique period in time where we've always known about remote working, and as of late, you've probably heard about companies, prior to this coronavirus stuff, where they invested a significant amount of money in open concept floor plans, which now is just kind of a waste, because now people are going to be going to work. They're going to be needing to wear a mask and not be in community areas and those types of things. So I think what we're looking at here is this real shift in what we're forcing leaders to do now is really lead. They really need to lead now. They really need to learn the skill of leadership and change their behavior. And it's going to be a difficult thing. And what we're going to see, I think, is some leaders are going to adapt and overcome. And I think we're going to see some that fail to adapt and overcome. And that will be at their detriment. So go ahead.
And it can take a lot of different forms. It's interesting what you're saying, because I was reading a report from, a major consultancy earlier this week, and actually they're taking consumer sentiment surveys and people that have been moved over to remote work. And you can look at the sentiments around virtual working prior to this situation and now. And actually a majority of the respondents actually find more value in continuing in a remote work environment into the future, right? Whether that's for personal freedom decisions, getting out of the commuting scenario, or just being able to deal with more safely the health crisis that we're operating within, right? And what that might look like in the future. And so certainly you have something like that. But I think that even outside of, what we're hearing too here is like, there can be a double-edged sword, right? There's a lot of discussion in certain jurisdictions and even just writ large about the idea of contract employees, right? And being able to have a little bit more freedom there if you're coming at it maybe from an employer's perspective versus, somebody if you're thinking about it as an independent contractor perspective. And some things people are saying is, well, maybe this changes the dynamic a little bit on the independent contractor view of things. Maybe you can get around this by having these sort of mercenaries of, if you will, for hire that would be able to augment, right? And I don't necessarily mean to have that in a negative connotation, but certainly people can have different views on that. But I wonder if other folks on the line have a view on, the ways that businesses might be able to adapt as it pertains to this particular topic. Thoughts?
Yeah. I'm wondering if this is a new form of the gig economy, and people are seeing opportunities wherever they live. You know, no longer is it necessary for you to spend $5,000 to live in the city so you can walk to your place of work, to pull out the laptop out of your bag, open your laptop, and do the same work that you'd be doing at home. I think, you know, we have now an opportunity to reevaluate this and make some positive changes. And I think it's definitely worth looking at.
You know, it's interesting. I kind of reflect back. I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago, the controversy at Yahoo, where Marissa Mayer recalled all of the field workers because she didn't like that model. And there was mass outrage at the time. And I was very public just saying that was an absolute bonehead move for a CEO to make. I mean, I think I wrote a whole column on it in Forbes. I thought it was just absolutely wrong. So now we kind of fast forward to today, and I look at Dorsey's comment yesterday, and I'm sitting there scratching my head and asking myself, why is that such a bold move? Why is that being touted as this really amazing thing to do? It's the right thing to do. That's what good leaders do. They do the right things. And so I think it's just reflective of the culture that we live in. And there's a lot of fear-based organizations. Why wouldn't every employer just make that, okay, that's an option. You want to work from home? Work from home. I think it's got to be a massive change in organizational design, right? I mean, organizational design is defined as the psychology of people at work. I mean, this is not new science, right? This has been around a long time. And to Dan's point, to Blake, your point, Nick, yours as well. I mean, some leaders just don't get it. So let me ask you guys a couple of questions. So let's go back to the Big Brother thing. If I implemented those types of tools, how long would you guys work here?
So I think there's a couple different ways to look at these types of tools. There's one that's outright invasion of privacy.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. And then I think, you know, companies should also be looking at technologies to safeguard, company assets and
IP,
ideas,
that kind of thing.
IP,
I get
that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think what we're talking about is the opposite. I just want to create some clarity there.
Yeah, to answer your question, I would be looking for another job.
Yeah, I would.
It's just I don't know. It hits you more than just like as an employee. It's like as a person. It's like, oh, like this organization doesn't really trust me as a person, right? Like not just as a worker. For some reason, those two things are just inextricably linked. And I think privacy is you know, we like to hold that as like an inalienable. Some people in this country think that, you know, it's not outlined specifically in the Constitution, but it's an inalienable right in some sense to a lot of people. And so it evokes a lot of emotions. And I think you would see mass exodus in some regards if leaders start instituting sort of more draconian measures.
And it is draconian. It's totally draconian. 100%. You know, like I've got some neighbors who have teenage kids, and you know, they ask to see their kid's phone, and the answer is a hard no. So what is this next generation going to expect from their employer? And it's probably not an invasion of privacy. I think it's just expected, and their mindset just operates in that manner. And I think we need to be forward leaning as companies and leaders to embrace that, so that way we can evolve.
You know, I was talking with somebody yesterday, a professional who her job has recently been moved from a sort of on-premise situation to a remote situation. And really interestingly, like she was telling me that as she's going through this, her organization is requiring at the end of the day employees to go through like a lesson. They go through a lesson, and at the end of it, they have to take a test. And they have to submit the test to prove that during the day they were somehow at work or present, even though it doesn't have anything to do with like her day job and what she should be doing. And I'm just like, I remember asking her, I said, because I think I have the same reaction that you do. It's like, well, one, why, and two, why do that? But my question was, well, why do you deal with that, or how are people taking that? And she said something that I think is pretty valid. She said, like in this current environment, I'm lucky to have a job, and maybe I'll accept certain things that I wouldn't have accepted under normal circumstances. And it's like this idea that people talk about, you give up a couple of personal liberties, it's hard to get those things back. And so I recognize that that's part of the issue as well. And I think that leaders need to be really cognizant of that. I think a good leader should, he or she should work with a level of integrity. And that includes a situation like this, right? But I think even from my perspective, right, and our perspective as, talent advisors, one thing that I think could be coming through here is, if you're getting into this position and you're seeing this, I think in a lot of ways, it could be the result of not having the practices up front to ensure you as an organization are aligned on what you stand for, but just as importantly, the way you go about hiring. What are you actually looking for in your people? Because if you've selected and you've assessed and you've had a robust process whereby you're bringing on the talent that is going to be the right talent for your organization, you don't need the surveillance state. You've got it. You've got the right people in place. And so for you, I think really what I'm looking at when I see this, I look at an organization and say, wow, you obviously messed up, or you weren't thinking about this the right way when you were building your team, because otherwise you would not have to do this.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what I can tell you for sure about your neighbor is the minute there are opportunities in the market, we talked previously about low switching costs, and things of that nature. She's gone. I mean, they've already lost her. They just don't know it yet. And she's already thinking about how to make that next move. She's just trying to get some security in the interim. And I think, if a leader views their job first and foremost as taking care of their team, the silliness just never gets embedded in an organization, right? But I said it earlier, the organizations that are struggling with this were struggling before. They just may not have known it, and this has just amplified the problems to everybody. Now the question is, are those leaders going to do the things they need to do to solve those problems, right? And so one of the things we talk about all the time with respect to the future of work, right, is self-cannibalization. I mean, you're either going to eat yourself or somebody else is going to eat you. So when it comes to stupid processes and rules and bad business practices, you've got to get rid of those things yourself before they destroy you. And I think this is a moment in time that all organizations can just step back and say, hey, let's take a strong look at our organizational construct. Let's take a strong look at our team. Let's take a strong look at communications protocols. Let's take a strong look, not where we are today and stick our head in the sand, protect the core, but there's core, there's adjacencies, and there's new, right? And you got to be looking out on the horizon. I think most large organizations are really focused right here, right? They're focused on making the quarter. And that's a big part of the problem. They don't feel that they have the latitude to go out, right? I mean, how many times have you heard people say, oh, a 5-year plan's ridiculous, a 10-year plan's ridiculous? Well, you need to at least have a vision for that horizon. And if you're only planning on a quarterly basis, it's just a matter of time until you implode. So, I mean, these are real opportunities for companies to think about right now.
Completely agree. It's really coming from a perspective where I used to help clients think through 3 to 5 year strategies. I couldn't agree with you more. You've got the tactical, but you have to have an end goal in mind. And I wonder if it's interesting if you guys feel the same way, because it's so funny. I feel like we're much more critical sometimes on our teams, and if we were to think about the way we deal with customers and our clients, perhaps that could be a guiding force. So as an example, right, if you're in professional services like we are, but even if you're outside of professional services, we're delivering incredibly important work for organizations. There's a certain level of trust they have to have in the process, right? They're not coming in and checking in every single day. They're certainly not walking by our desk, but yet at the end of the day, we're giving them recommendations and tangible results that can literally change the trajectory of their business. And that's not to sound self-important, but that's what we're in the business of doing. That's what many businesses exist to serve a need, right? And so obviously customers find value in that. And so how are you able to create that trust with the client, right, when you're working in this sort of environment? If you're able to do that, maybe think internally, well, geez, I'm doing this with clients. Like, why can't I do that with my team? How do I think through these relationships? How do I be a trusted advisor to my team? These are things to me where I find it so ironic, where we have this really interesting perspective when we're inward focused, but we can learn a lot, I think, from the way that we generate trust with external customers and clients. I don't know, thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're spot on.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would agree as well.
Yeah.
That good, huh? All right, well, just totally nailed it. Good.
Nailed it.
I think all interactions are a chance for learning and development, right? And so whether you're looking externally or internally, anytime you engage with somebody, you have a feel as to whether or not that interaction is going well, right? Is it moving you forward? Is it grinding you to a halt? Is it taking you backward? Is it yanking you sideways? I mean, if you're self-aware and you're empathetic and you're emotionally intelligent, you're looking at these interactions as ways to help one another do better, be better, right? And I think a lot of times managers are just, they're a hammer looking for a nail. And I think, that's where a lot of organizations go wrong. I mean, it's the difference between ideation and innovation, right? Lots of people ideate. They ideate all day long. I mean, I can be guilty of that myself at times, right? I mean, I've got notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks of where I want to see our organization be down the road. But the difference between ideation and innovation is innovation gets to market. Innovation becomes operationalized. Innovation is tangible. It's real. It's not just, ideating for the sake of ideating. And so I think when we're engaging with our teammates and with our clients, we have to help them understand why we're doing what we're doing, why they're doing what they're doing. And I'll just be frank. I mean, we have clients that are 100% switched on. They understand the impact of talent, and they go about engaging with us in a very enlightened fashion, very purposed, very intentional. Then we have clients that, it's kind of a check the box exercise. It's like, okay, we need to check these boxes and, we need to have this chair filled, and they miss the bigger picture. And it's, it's incumbent upon us to help them see the flaws in their process without tipping them over, right? And sometimes that's really hard to do,
Why do you think that is?
I think I've got this is a belief that I've long held as being true. The people that created the environment that they're in are built to protect it, not built to change it. Okay, so if my fingerprints are all over the DNA on the architecture of something, and somebody comes in and wants to kind of say, hey, have you thought about X? Or instead of zigging, how about zagging? Or instead of doing this, how about doing that? Their immediate response is boom, right? Because you're criticizing the thing that they created. So, it's more of an exercise of how do you get them to see that there's an opportunity to be better without being threatening. And I think that's the challenge, right?
Yeah. I can see, if you're somebody who's worked really, really hard to build this thing up, there's some inertia there, and that's okay. I think that's totally okay. You've spent so much time and energy to build something, and you're going to see it sort of unravel in a way. And so I can see the resistance there. But, again, we mentioned this in the last live stream last week was, adaptability. It's adapt or die. Adapt or die. Otherwise, you're not going anywhere. And the fact is this is an adaptive environment I think we need to be operating within, in my own personal opinion, with what I'm hearing. I don't know, Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sort of more pessimistic in my view on adaptability. I think a lot of the people who have their fingerprints on organizations, especially big ones, they've been with those organizations for a long time. They've risen up in the ranks, and their fingerprints are all over, and their relationships are entrenched. And I think there is such an interest to try to go back to the way it was for that reason. And until those people exit the organization, either, you know, maybe you have early retirements or what have you, those are the influencers and the decision makers today. It's a generational thing. It's an inertia thing. And I think there is going to be a lot that is preventing organizations from making the right decisions to adapt, purely because most of the influencers and decision makers have, you know, they have entrenched interest in keeping things the way that they were. The way that things were helped them get to where they are. And so to change that is to put themselves at risk. I just don't think a lot of the organizations and CEOs, and even aside from just them, are going to want to make those decisions without sort of a board or an external entity sort of getting involved and saying, we need to rethink management. We need to sort of wholesale change the way we think about our approach and our design. The people that are there are going to protect their own interests.
Those are really insightful comments, Nick, because I think you can look at organizations right now and you can see the organizations that are trying to move forward versus the ones that are trying to go backward, right? And I mean, it tells you everything you need to know. Are they trying to reestablish the way things were, or are they looking at this as an opportunity to get better, to do better, right? And I think, you know, I've always said successful companies beat their competition to the future, right? I mean, that's the race that we're in, is trying to figure out the future. It's the old cliche Gretzky quote, right? I mean, that's what we're all trying to do. And so, you know, if all you're doing is trying to restore the past, there's no there there. There's certainly no future there, right? It's just it's the wrong move. So, you know, if you're part of an organization that is trying to take you right back to pre-COVID, you know, my suggestion is take a look at moving to a different organization that's looking not at the present, not at the past, but post-COVID, right? They're looking at the future. Those are the organizations that are going to attract the best talent, period.
Right. And they're going to do it without geography and regional constraints.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that brings up, you know, an interesting point. I think those companies that are forward-leaning, who are skating to where the puck's going, bringing up the Wayne Gretzky quote, you know, they are finding ways to hire without physically meeting someone. They are finding ways to allow their workforce to work and do their daily operations from wherever they are, whether it be a beach or a Starbucks or their home or on their back patio. They are looking and finding ways to make work convenient for the employee. And to me, that is leadership right there. And I think that's very, very important, because the companies that are thinking that way are going to be the companies of the future. You know, like everybody else is the horse and buggy. You know, it's just like, come on, we need to evolve to the automobile here, not invent another cleaner, faster horse. So
I'll give you a great example. The first job that I got out of the military, when I got hired, I asked him why I got the job, and he said, "Your gig line was square, your shirt was starched, and your shoes were shined." And I thought to myself way back then, I'm like, really?
that's it.
Really? I mean, Lord help us if that's how people are still hiring folks, right? I mean, you know, I think we've just got to evolve. And look, I still spit shine my shoes, right? But the shoes that I spit shine, I bet I wear 3 times a year now, you know, because I don't, you know, I mean, the world has just changed, and we have to evolve with it. And so I think they're just, they're guardians of the past, and their time has passed. They just don't realize it. And those folks really need to either adapt or get the heck out of the way. And I think you can see the great CEOs out there, right? And again, they're being trumpeted as insightful and with a lot of foresight and a lot of vision. Nah, they're just good leaders. And so they're
adapting well.
Yeah, and what we need to do is look at the people that aren't and figure out how to get them into an adaptive mindset, or replace them with somebody that has that adaptive mindset. And that's how you're going to have a team that wins.
That's right. Yeah, totally agree. And look, we all know that there are a lot of organizations that they have to have a physical presence, whether it's manufacturing, totally get that, right? But it's a rare organization that doesn't have some degree of flexibility in terms of being able to have dispersed talent networks. If you're thinking about this, maybe it's just a mindset shift. It's a situation where if you try to like take it away and make it a positive thing. So for instance, you now have an entire new set of geographies that you can be able to target for talent. If you're looking for somebody and you're located in industry X, in city X, you don't have to worry about getting over the hurdle of saying, I've got to find somebody in my current locale or get somebody to relocate, because that could be a serious barrier. Now you have the entire talent landscape open to you. And that should be exciting. If I'm thinking through competition and talent and any sort of leg up I can get over my competitors, you better believe I want to take advantage of something like that, because good people are not just where you are, they're all over. And now all of a sudden you've just widened your aperture significantly. And some people that I'm talking
ding, ding. That's the right answer.
So if you're watching this and you're looking for a job and you have LinkedIn Premium, make sure that little box for being open to recruiters for remote is checked, is what we're saying here.
And if you're hiring,
I mean, we built this organization exactly with one of those pillars, right? I mean, we've been, virtual for well over a decade. And I think, for me, I've always told clients, I said, look, if you're going to hire a talent advisor, look at the talent that they've attracted for themselves, right? And I truly believe that our team stands apart and stands above because we've gone after the best talent we could find. And we don't care how old they are, what their gender is, where they're located. I mean, we're looking for all the right things. And that's what makes this place interesting, right? I mean, if this place was just a matter of, my latest idea, we'd be in a world of hurt, right? But what we have is an aggregate thought base here. And so that's what makes this place really interesting. I mean, I'll just, let's talk about something that we're doing internally right now as an example. So we are in a formal process of reimagining the future of search, right? We're in a formal process of breaking down what we do and asking questions like, why are we doing it? Should we stop doing it? Is there a better way to do this? How will clients react to it? What level of service improvements will we see? And so, we're right now taking everything we know as a sacred cow and throwing it up and just letting people rip it apart, right? And the interesting thing is, guess who's not part of that process yet? Me. I mean, and if it would have been left to my own design, I probably would have been sticking my nose in here or there, right? But I received really good counsel from my team to say, hey, Mike, you've got a vested interest in this thing. You built it. Let's step back. Let's take a look at it. And when we've got something that we think will hold weight, where the thesis is sound, we're definitely going to want your actions and reactions and insights, but let us flesh this thing out. And I got to tell you, it's a beautiful thing, because I know for a fact we're going to come out of the backside of this with much better ideas, much better ability to execute, more efficiently execute, more ability to add value to our team and to our clients and to our candidates. And I don't have a thing to do with that. And that, I got to tell you, that's how leaders should work. And I just think my lucky stars that I have a team that's strong enough to just say, hey, Mike, stay the heck out of this. Let us do what you hired us to do. And then when we're ready, we'll make some refinements and some adjustments. And I got to tell you, if more companies were secure enough in their beliefs to do things like that, it'd be a great thing. It'd be a great thing. I guess thankfully I'm glad most of our competitors aren't, but I got a lot of trust and faith in you guys, and I'm excited about the future because we're focused on it.
It's quite interesting. It's quite appropriate that we're coming full circle here with what you're talking about. It goes back to trust, right?
Yeah.
So no, completely agree. So maybe this is a good wrapping up point, for us to put a bow on it. Appreciate the discussion today. Appreciate everybody's thoughts. Mr. Evans, I'll turn it over to you to sort of end things here for us, and we can be on our way.
All right. Hey, thanks everyone for watching today. Again, we are here at 11 Eastern, Monday through Friday with our team. Future of Work is Thursday. And if you got some value out of this, we'd greatly appreciate if you'd share this, like it, leave a comment, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.